You're listening to Never Off Duty. This week, Sheriff Cook is here, and we are pleased to be joined by Chief Wagner, who is the chief of the school board police. Am I getting all the designations correctly for the?
That is
That's
correct.
why we have a civilian in the podcast crew with us.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I'm very excited to have you because.
Well, thank you for having me.
A pleasure, and I think that's why people don't quite understand the separation of everything that's going on. I was trying to think of this morning, the best way to explain it to a civilian. And I guess it's a little bit like, there's different governments if you think about it. And that's the same thing. There's different entities. It's a little bit easier when we get the separation of boundaries of, okay, there's Duval, there's Clay, there's this. But it's almost, if you look at it from a perspective of, we have the United States government, but we in Clay County fall under that. We have Tallahassee, Florida government. We fall under that. And then we have our local government. We still fall under that. There's all different jurisdictions and things like that. That's my horrible way of looking at.
Very nicely done.
It's a quick civics lesson.
But if you want to explain better to the people, to our listeners in Clay County and around the nation, as we found out by analytics.
Sure. The school police department was started back in 2019, and there was some disagreements with the former sheriff, and clearly we don't have those type of disagreements anymore with Sheriff Cook at the helm now. But the school district decided to, through adoption, create their own police department. So there are other agencies similar to ours right here in the 4th Judicial Circuit in Clay, Duval, Nassau. Each of those school districts have their own police department too. So it's an addition to some of the services that are already in place, but it's specific to the school. And each of the officers, there's 48 of us, and one in each school, plus some additional ones for additional resources. But each of them are sworn law enforcement officer. A lot of them come with varying backgrounds from local jurisdictions right here from Clay County, from Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I have one officer from Hawaii that's on board with us. So a lot of good officers. And the difference is that these officers, this is what their dedication is specifically. They come because that's primarily what we do is school policing. And school policing in of itself there's the police aspect, but there's a lot of social things that go along with school policing.
Yeah, I definitely can imagine that. I was thinking back to going to college and how university police was different than TPD where I was at. I have at least one Florida fan in the house. But it was so easy to understand there because the needs of a university were, they weren't. Some college kids get into some trouble that I think that the TPD was maybe more focused on other things, whereas it's like, okay, just shut the party down.
Right.
Like a little bit more, I'm not going to say understanding, but they are because they're in the middle of it every day versus the entire city, which is almost its own ecosystem on that level.
And I think, you guys sort of allude to an interesting fact about school board police is statutorily, they are given the authority to handle minor offenses, what would be considered offenses administratively. Yes. And so they, whereas your stereotypical sheriff's deputy or police officer may not be aware of all of those administrative options, the school board police really have the opportunity to be familiar with the administrative options that are available and utilize them legally when there's a minor offense.
Like a minor offense, let's say
two kids fighting.
Yeah. We don't have to make an arrest on those. We can take that incident. We would write an incident report, but then we can close that case out with administrative sanctions from the school. It could be in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, writing an essay or anything like that. Florida law is very specific. It's Chapter 985.
That's awesome.
If anybody's curious on where all this stuff comes from, but
awesome that you know it. I mean, I know that you.
That's his job to know that.
Well, I know that.
Yeah.
But it's I know construction stuff, but I still sometimes have to pull the book up if you want to the exact page.
So that's where a lot of it comes. So we don't believe in the philosophy that it's a prison pipeline. That's not what we're doing. Kids do darndest things. They do it all the time.
That's putting it nicely.
Yes. There are some kids who do some pretty things that will shock the conscience, but the vast majority, they just do make bad decisions and bad mistakes, and you correct that just like you would if you were a parent, and then you move on, and then it's progressive discipline. If they continue on, then you just take it to the next step.
Absolutely, and I think that that's the uniqueness of the school system, and anybody that has kids knows this. They don't know. I mean, they're a sponge learning, and until they can contextually take what they've learned and apply it to a new situation, which unfortunately seems to be getting older and older when that happens, they don't know, and they have to learn. And the way you learn is by making mistakes. It's unfortunate. Some kids are intelligent enough to be able to go, oh, Johnny made that mistake, I'm not going to duplicate that. But the reality is most kids see Johnny do it and don't associate that the exact same mistake will be theirs, and they have to have that, I would say, scary moment when somebody like you talks, or one of your officer talks to them.
Yeah. And the good thing about it is, and I'll use the officer at Orange Park High School. His relationship with those students is phenomenal. He is, when some of these kids make mistakes that would potentially have criminal sanctions behind them, sometimes he can divert them, but it's not like a true adversarial where it's cops and robbers type thing. It's like a father figure and talking to that student like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Or, hey, this is how we're going to handle it. And those are the uniqueness that you're dealing with when you're doing school policing, because these officers are well embedded into the school environment and embedded with those students on a completely different level that you would think of, because an officer that's out on the street, because I was there, you're running call to call to call to call. There's not much time to invest. Whereas in the school policing environment, there is time to invest.
So let me jump in here, because one of the things I definitely want to talk about today is the impact of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas has had on law enforcement in schools. But I think before we do that, I'd love to hear more about your history. I mean, I know you're the chief of police, and prior to that, you were with CCSO. Sort of talk us through when you started in law enforcement and what your path has been to now.
I started my law enforcement career in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Airport Police.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in Los Angeles, and then in 1997, I moved out to Florida, and I joined the Clay County Sheriff's Office in 1998, where
how did you end up in Clay County? Out of go from Los Angeles to Clay.
So
culture shock.
Here's how it is.
Here's what happened.
Yeah. So my mother's sister, my aunt, her husband was in the military, who was stationed at NES Jacks. And they planted the seed here in Orange Park. And then my mom moved out here. And then as I was starting to see, I had a young daughter. I was starting to see the violence in Los Angeles grow and grow and grow. I said, maybe it's time for me to just let me go to the other side of the continent here and let me raise my child here and continue my career in law enforcement. And that's what allowed me to land here in Clay County.
So you joined Clay County Sheriff's Office in 1998.
1998.
What have you over the years? What have you done?
I was in patrol for about 18 months, and the majority of my career at the Clay County Sheriff's Office was an investigator. And at that time, we were split in two parts. It was a north sector and a south sector. I was a south sector, and at that time, we had everything. We didn't have individual, robbery, homicide. We didn't have SVU. You got everything. You walk in the morning, you got everything. And so I did that quite a bit. And then I took a hiatus from the sheriff's office in 2002, and I joined the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. So, and I was still living here in Clay. And
now, were you all crossover at that time? I don't remember the years. Sheriff Cook, you were.
She was there.
Yeah, I was there. I was there. Yeah,
she was there. She was ranked. I was just an officer.
2002, I was a lieutenant.
She was ranked. She had a gold badge.
Oh, wait a minute. No, actually, I was a sergeant still, I believe.
She had a gold badge. I had a silver badge.
Yes.
So
Peons. I'm just kidding.
So I was still living in Clay County, and as I was commuting back and forth to work in Jacksonville to here, I realized that my heart was still here in Clay County. So I had to go up and put my tail between my legs and say I need to go back to Clay County. So I went back to Clay County in 2003. And then in 2003, Sheriff Lancaster was in office at the time, and he said, I have a perfect job for you. And he said, I'd like for you to do public integrity, which is internal affairs. Like, oh my goodness. Okay. I mean, I'm asking for a job, so I might as well do what's asked of me. And it was a very rewarding part of my career because you see lots of different things, lots of perspective, and understanding policy and how to apply policy to allegations of misconduct. And so that was a very good experience. And I eventually promoted to sergeant, and I went back out on the street again as a sergeant, and then I became a watch commander shortly thereafter, and as a lieutenant, did patrol there, and then I bounced from patrol to the juvenile crimes unit, which was the SRO program at the time. Then I went to training, and then
wait, they called the SRO program Juvenile Crime Unit.
It used to be the Juvenile Crime Unit. So
That's
do
labeling.
you want to let everybody know what SRO stands for?
It's school resource officers. Yes. And then I went to the training unit, and that was an experience.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's like, yeah, no, it's crime.
Yeah. And then I went back to the juvenile crime unit. I know it's kind of sounds a little funny, but it's the school policing. And then from there, until the time that the school police started, that's where I finished my career with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and I've been since
So you were the head of the SRO?
I was.
Okay. And,
Yes.
and that makes sense. So naturally...
The day-to-day operations, but there was a captain, and then it eventually changed when Sheriff Daniels came into office. They changed to a chief, but I did have a supervisor, but the day-to-day operations and the boots on the ground was under my leadership.
And that was 2018.
2018,
2018.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas,
do you want to explain to the listeners what that is, 'cause in case
the Parkland shooting?
Yes.
Yeah, the Parkland.
Because a lot of people only know it as that. That's why.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a lot of legislation that came out of that. It's probably one of the fastest legislations that I've ever seen pass, probably within 2 weeks. And that's where they came up where all school districts were responsible to have a safe school officer on campus. And a safe school officer could be one of 4 different things. It could be an SRO. As I speak now, I'm speaking statutory terms.
Okay.
An SRO is a county or municipal law enforcement officer. You can have a guardian, which could be a school employee or a designated school employee, such as a person guardian only, or it could be a teacher that's armed, or you can have a security officer that has the guardian training. And then, or you can have a school safety officer, which school police officers under the statute are law enforcement officer, but they're under the statute, they're designated as school safety officers.
And all of these are armed.
Every one of them is armed.
Yeah, and prior to the 2018 shooting at Parkland, I mean, it was just you had the SROs, and so since then, as you stated, the legislation regarding and the efforts made regarding school safety is really ramped up, and I would say that your job is much more complex today than it was even 5 years ago with all the requirements that have been coming out. So talk about some of the other requirements that schools and school police have now.
So now you have each school has a mental health component and a threat assessment team that law enforcement is directly a component of. So when a lot of these incidents that occur, law enforcement has to be involved in that. And when we sit down and when a child makes a statement or anything like that that causes alarm, that statement is actually analyzed by a behavioral health person, the school administrator, a teacher, and an SRO. And that component is not only just at school. I can't speak what other agencies do throughout Florida, but what we do is if a child makes a threat to use a firearm or any other type of weapon, we don't leave it at the school threshold. We go to the house too, and we communicate with parents. And sometimes some parents don't understand what's in their child's bedroom. And we have gone to houses before where there's been some inappropriate things in their bedroom. So we look at it as a holistic type of way of how to thwart any type of threat that a child may make. So those are a lot of legislative mandates that came post the Marjorie Stoneman incident.
And I think obviously as a parent, it's your biggest concern.
Absolutely.
I don't know of any parent that either they aren't cognitive of what's going on in society right now that it isn't on their mind. What I find I guess it's not troubling because it's the I don't know how to solve this, so that's why I'm glad you're here. You can tell me what y'all do. So I was recently on campus where my kid goes to school, and the kids were saying, doing the whole these are third or second graders, so they were like, oh, we're shooting you, I'm going to shoot you. Now they had just all seen Spider-Man, so they were talking about web shooters, and that's all it was. But I mean, it was one of those things that you go, if you were joking around like that and it was taken wrong, I mean, this could be a shutdown scenario. There's could be, and I feel horrible for kids that they can't have that moment. And
it is very important to understand context.
Yes,
that is a true good example of context, of understanding what's said. And that's what part of, because for the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas incident, I'm not even going to name that suspect, but that guy, there was a lot of red flags that were ignored. Yes. So with this new legislation, it's forcing law enforcement, school districts to take a closer look and examine what's going on. Is it an incident that it's a bullying incident, to solve it on that back end so that a child in crisis doesn't reach a breaking point and then lashes out like what happened in some of these other school districts across the country. So those are a lot of legislative mandates that came out, and it's pretty tasking. It's especially when you're dealing with a threat, because there's a lot of threats that come over social media that get a lot of people upset, and there's a lot of resources that come. And while I don't have a lot of resources, I have to lean on the sheriff sometimes, say, hey, we have a pretty significant threat and we don't know where it's coming from, but we're going to need some additional running around to make sure that our school's safe here. And that's a great partnership that we have with the school district and the sheriff's office.
And that's great. And it's one of these things as a parent, you hope, or anyone, and even any citizen society hopes, that all school districts that have their own force have that relationship with their sheriff. Unfortunately, I know enough about politics to know there probably are places where they're fighting, and I'm sure if it came down to it, that's one thing. When something happens, people tend to come together, but leading up to it, there's the butting of heads.
You have to have cooperation. I mean, listen, people are going to butt heads and have disagreements, but if you respect each other's position, the disagreements can be worked out. And, I will say that we have a great working relationship between the sheriff's office and the school board and the other two municipal police departments in Clay County. And, we're constantly communicating, we're constantly training together, we're constantly meeting. And because at the end of the day, it's about keeping kids safe. I mean, that is at the end of the day, egos aside, it's about keeping kids safe. And so, like I said, a few minutes ago, it's just much more complex now versus it used to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you only had to have the SRO at the high schools.
Yeah.
That was legally, you only had to have SROs at high schools. Now you have to have officers in every school.
Every school, including our charter schools. Charter schools are required to have a safe school officer also.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. So, and we now have we have 2 current, and number 3 is opening up.
I was about to say, with House Bill 1, you'll probably have more, private schools wouldn't fall under that, correct? Or
no, they're not mandated. However, the legislation did open up to afford them the opportunity to have a guardian on their campuses.
Oh, okay.
And what's interesting about that is, by law, the sheriff has to train all the guardians.
Yeah, under Chapter 30.
I have to train all the guardians, but then he employs them.
So I have to ask the question, but now, anytime, this is why I love Tallahassee or any government, they great intentions, but did they also include a budget to train these people, or did you have to take that out of your?
So what was great is
here's $2.
Luckily for the sheriff, there is allocations each year that the sheriff will apply for grants, and then the grants will fund such as the $500 stipend that they get, bullets, and all of those different things. While it probably doesn't go dollar for dollar, I'm sure there's some charity that's ultimately given by the sheriff, but it's really important, and there are some dollars that do come down.
That's right, and that's why it's important for you as citizens listening, when things like school safety, community policing, anything, that might have been a poor choice of word depending on where you stand, but if you want a safe society, and that's where you think it is, which I do, obviously, I'm very pro law enforcement. You have to lean on the people you elect to let them know that you're pro law enforcement and expect that from them, because at the end of the day, they help pay for it. They decide where funds go, and the reality is, if you look at departments around the nation that have been defunded, crime goes up.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
where well-funded departments, you tend to have low crime and better standard of living. So,
Yeah, you have to invest in what you believe in. And if public safety and if your kids' safety is paramount, then there has to be the investment in school safety and law enforcement.
I think here in Clay County, I'm on my 25th year here just in Clay County, and luckily the community does want
they're great.
A great partnership with their law enforcement, fire rescue, and it's funded. Maybe not to the best it can be, but it is funded, and I think everything that I instill in the school police department comes from the majority of my career being at the Clay County Sheriff's Office. So, I would just say it would be Clay County Sheriff's Office .2.
There you go. So, to tease, we still have some time before we break, but I wanted to let people know where we're going, because I'm sure somebody's listening and they're going, well, let's talk through what happens in a worst case scenario, what we can operationally. And I think that's important, that people need to I want to let them know I'm not going to dodge that. Because you need to know, people want that peace of mind and of what we can talk about for what's keeping your children safe. So that's coming. I did have a question though, leading up to that. So you see a lot with social media, and I think like threats that, kids, I'll be politically incorrect. Kids are dumb. They say things that, well, even adults do it too. We were talking about this beforehand, like the people that make fun of some of us in this room on social media. They're ridiculous. The things that people say, they would not necessarily say in front of them, but they do that. Do y'all monitor social media? If you're allowed to talk about it, if you can, I understand completely, because that might be we don't want to talk about it. But
we do.
Okay.
We do.
So, and that seems great to me, because that's the first indicator. But man, that's a lot of there's
it's like
so much
false
out there.
alarms. To me, it reminds me of alarms on people's houses. 99.9% of alarms are false. Mm-hmm. You just got to be prepared for that 0.1%.
And having relationships with kids, they're even monitoring too.
Yes.
And when they hear it, they're telling their parents, and then their parents. And we're sometimes getting that even before, say, the law enforcement support in Northeast Florida. We're getting those information before they even get it, because these kids, they're constantly monitoring and reading and their interactions. They'll report it pretty quickly,
and it spreads like wildfire.
It does.
A lot of especially the Snapchat threats start literally. You can see them starting in another part of the country and then just make their way across the country, and they end up here in Clay County. It really is. It's an interesting dynamic that exists with social media and school safety, and we always have to err on the side of caution. That's our job, right? But a lot of social media threats just spread like wildfire, and we'll get it's funny because we will get notifications from other parts of the country. Hey, this school threat's being shared over here in this state. It's probably coming to Florida soon, and so we share that information just so we know what to expect. So when we see it, it's not the first time we're seeing it.
And speaking of that, that's where y'all's training comes in, and being able to tell the difference between I think it was 2020 had a threat on me and my family on social media, and it was to me, family, very frightening. But when talking to law enforcement, they're like, we know you're concerned, but this is not a real threat. This is that.
It's hard to explain to parents though, because if my 6-year-old is going to kindergarten and there's a social media threat and there's any inkling of a chance that my 6-year-old is going to be harmed, it's real to me.
Absolutely.
And we have to balance not being callous, but also the reality of the investigative work that we do. And many times we can debunk these threats pretty quickly. Like, as soon as we see it, we say, no, that's the one that we got the bolo on from California, saying this one was going around. but you still have concern. You'll have hundreds of concerned parents reach out and go, "Did you see the threat?" "Yes, ma'am. It's not, it's not a valid threat." "Are you sure it's not a valid threat?" "How do you know it's not a valid threat? Should I not take my kid to school?" I mean, and I understand the parents' concern. I really do. The good news is these days, pretty quickly through experience and investigative techniques, we can ascertain if there's any potential credibility to this threat.
Now, who is obviously ultimately the responsibility comes back to the parent. Let's be clear as far as teaching your child about proper use of social media and not doing stupid things on there. But the reality is, not all parents are even aware still what social media is, which is we'll get into that because I think that's a fascinating thing of all the things kids are capable of discovering that we're not even realizing is out there. But do schools, do they have a conference? I mean, like a get together where they like try to explain, like, this is proper behavior in society. You can't do this. I mean, are they proactive like this or should they be?
It's just a challenge to the kids when you tell them, don't do this.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do this.
We do try to take a proactive approach to that. And all the officers have that training through the Attorney General's office, which is social media etiquette. And it's a complete program that we administer to. We even have a parents program that we talk to parents, and I have administered that program once to try to branch out and explain that some of these things, because not only is it threats, but sometimes kids do inappropriate things, and once it hits the internet, it's forever.
Yes.
So there's two components to that, and then of course we, in a school district, being educators, they're constantly pushing that message out, but that message only goes so far because if somebody wants to do something inappropriate, because the motion at that time, they're going to do it. But unfortunately,
I mean, a lot of kids they're not fully developed yet with their reasoning and the understanding of consequences. So they do something or share something thinking
impulsive.
It's funny.
Yes.
Very impulsive, not realizing the long-term consequences. And that's a battle too, because, like Chief Wagner said earlier, the vast, vast majority of the kids in school are great kids, but sometimes even great kids have moments of weakness where they make a dumb decision.
Absolutely. And I think what's got to be extremely hard is, and kids are very good about being at the cutting edge of technology. And to the extent that, like, whereas now Facebook is...
It's for old people like us.
Facebook is the MySpace these days.
Yes. And they're on to something else. Saturday Night Live did a joke about that once where the kids in the high school were like, "Oh yeah, we all hang out at Craigslist, Arizona, new cars." Like, like some weird forum in the middle of nowhere that nobody would but think of. And it makes it difficult. And then you've got online gaming, VR, the metaverse, places kids can go to really do things that you can't see what's going on, and I'm not I'm not a big fan of overreaching, but it is nice to know that if there's a threat made, how do you discover it? So leading to that, what do y'all do to stay up on that technology? It's so hard. I almost don't even know how you can. It's almost like you can learn all you can, but you really are constantly having to play catch up.
You're a step behind.
I think good old fashioned police work comes into it.
Relationships.
Okay, that's great.
Is having a relationship with those students, because they're the ones that are actually engaged in it every day, and when they see it, they'll come to us. And they'll tell their parents or whatever. If it's that concerning, sometimes they'll discern whether or not somebody's just having a little bit of verbal vomit or something like that. But if the hairs on their back stand up, they're going to report it.
Well, I found this fascinating. Now, I fully concede that this would never work here because we're a different society. But I think it's the Danish police. They actually have 4 or something officers that have an esports team that plays with all the local high school kids. And they're apparently really good too, so that they have the respect of the kids. And as a result, they've actually gotten into some, they were able to preemptively get, stop stuff because they're in that loop of that world. Now, obviously, to explain to a Clay County taxpayer, they were like, "Oh, we're starting an esports team." I would never suggest that here.
No, my question is, what is an esports team?
They play games for money. Basically that's the best way I can do it.
They play games.
Cops playing Call of Duty with kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
That's probably the better way to say it. That's yeah.
The police department has a unit that does that.
They do in Europe. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They're part of like cyber or something like that. So they do I'm sure they do other duties. I didn't get, I read that.
That's actually it's like community policing in a way. I mean, honestly, how is that? Virtually, yeah, versus like the ice cream socials that we do. Mm-hmm. That's actually kind of progressive idea. I like it.
And virtually is going to be a bigger part of everything. I mean,
absolutely. As technology continues to grow.
Well, even like last night, we did a big community meeting, and we used technology to Zoom it. And 10, 15 years ago, unless you came to the meeting, you didn't know what was happening. So technology we just have to embrace it and use it to our advantage. But as you guys said, the technology that these kids are using is so rapidly moving forward that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to keep up with what's there next. But if you have the relationships with the kids and they know they can come to you in confidence and you're going to take care of it, that's the key to preventing these active shooters events. And correct me if I'm wrong, I am not aware of a single incident that was prevented because law enforcement saw a threat online. I think there's been several cases, though, where kids saw what was being said online, then brought it to law enforcement.
Yes, and then that's where the intervention comes in at that point.
Well, and also, I mean, boy, some parents are not going to like this. But the reality is, some kids they know because they're with those kids every day. They know if Bob says this, it's a complete joke. But if Johnny says that their spider senses are tingling of that's not,
Johnny's been acting weird and he's odd and Yep.
So, I mean, they really are your canary in a coal mine.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So, all right. Well, we will take a first or a break and come right back. And thank you so much. This is great. Remember, if you are listening, to subscribe. Very important. Send your questions to sheriff at claysheriff.com.
Yep, sheriff at claysheriff.com, and we will get a list of those questions.
Is there we'll talk about this when we get back in case there's a place that parents could reach out if they need to and stuff like that. So listen to the break and you might get teased something there. You're listening to Never Off Duty. Okay, we are back to Never Off Duty. Again, Sheriff Cook is here. Chief Wagner's here. And we're having a great conversation about schools, school safety, school policing. And hopefully, if you have any follow-up questions, again, you should send it. If you have questions, send it to
Podcast. Questions,
yes.
Sorry, Judson.
Yeah, I need to do my vocal training before I come back on. If you have those questions, then send it to sheriff at claysheriff.com. It would be very helpful if you put podcast in the subject.
One word.
I do have a tendency to slur my words. I've noticed that when I listen to the editing, and so I do that sometimes. I get speaking too fast to enunciate properly.
Oh, look at you go. Look at him. Very nicely done.
If you have questions, though, related to school policing, and they should go to your website
oneclay.net.
Oneclay.net. And
spell out the word one. Yeah.
ONENET.net.
Okay.
No,
and you
spelled one net.
One clay.
One clay.
I'm sorry. It's okay. Oneclay.net. ONECLAY.net.
Yes.
I guess I was still stuck on the spell one.
Yes. So I know. I did this. That happens. It happens.
For the record, we are recording this podcast rather early in the morning, and I'm not sure if the coffee has settled in yet.
I've had none this morning.
Oh, I didn't get in till I was down in Orlando and I drove back last night. So I got in at 1 a.m. So I'm still tired. But anyways, so reach out. But speaking of reaching out, and this is something we talked about at the break, if you're a parent or a student and you are concerned, reach out to somebody.
Immediately. It doesn't matter what time it is. You can call the sheriff's office. You can call 911. It doesn't matter. Just reach out. Because if you hear something, see something, immediately say something. And then we'll be responsive to it.
And here's what's really cool. Both the Clay County Sheriff's Office and the school board use the Safer Watch system. So it's integrated. So if a parent has a concern, and let's say it happens at 1 a.m. and they're not sure if they want to call somebody, they can send the Safer Watch tip in, and it'll go directly to these guys as well. So we'll get it in the middle of the night, and then they'll get it as soon as they wake up. Or if it's of an imminent threat, we can call right then and say, "Hey, Chief Wagner, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We've got this imminent threat tip that has come in, and we need to get on it now." So please use Safer Watch. And if you're a parent, sign up for Safer Watch, because in the filters, you can select your child's school. So if anything happens at your child's school, you'll get a push notification to your phone.
Absolutely. And then also, that's one platform, but Florida Department of Law Enforcement also instituted Fortify Florida. Yep. Fortify Florida is required to be on each electronic device at the school district. That too is another means that hits law enforcement immediately on a state level all the way down to the local level.
And I really do believe this, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. We live in a society now, and I think this happened after 9/11, where we've become much more, we'd rather you tell us and be wrong than not tell us. Whereas there was almost, to me, well, I don't want to waste time. And nobody, obviously y'all's time and resources are limited. So you hope there's a little bit of I would say common sense, but but if you're not sure,
call, send a message, send a tip.
Let us do it. That's what they fund us to do, and let us do that.
Yes.
And somebody could send a tip, and maybe it's not everything we need at that moment, but it could be a piece to a larger puzzle that we're putting together or that presents itself to us. So, I would tell people, please, if you got something that you truly believe is important or might be important to us, you're not bothering us, send it to us. And if you don't want to call, send it via Safer Watch. And if you get information about something that's happening, and you don't want to call local authorities, definitely use Fortify Florida. I mean, there's no excuse not to notify somebody.
And of course, old school, just call.
Yeah.
Our
or
phone
stop
number,
a deputy. Stop a deputy.
The sheriff's office is 904-264-6512, and the school police is 904-336-0100.
For those of you who still know how to use a phone.
Yeah.
That's great. So before we get into some very serious stuff, I had some questions about jurisdictionally, because I've always wondered this, so I know viewers, you're driving down the road and maybe you're going 5 over the speed limit and you see the school police car behind you, which looks, you don't know the difference. Can they pull over a reckless driver too, or do they report it? How does that work?
Yeah, we do have a memorandum of understanding for serious offenses. Regardless, school police can initiate, not for minor traffic offenses. We do enforce traffic through the MOU and state statute, but something significant like a DUI, and we have done that. If we see a DUI, something that's dangerous, that's threatening, we're not going to just wait around and see the outcomes of that. We're going to do some type of intervention. They are law enforcement officers and they can take action.
Well, and you're out there. I think that's important that y'all saw it, and it means a lot for, like judge standpoint. There was a judge here locally, retired now, who called the police about a person doing like 100 through Clay County, and was pulled over and told the officer. By the time the officer got there, was not doing 100. Though there's no proof, though it's a call, yada, yada. Like, well, it was a judge. So
right.
It's the judge you're going to see tomorrow.
The one that would adjudicate the ticket if it was issued.
So but so it's good to be, just the fact that knowing they're out there and other people can do that. And then,
I mean, that doesn't, the only thing that, we've had, the sheriff's office, it could be in the middle of a shift change, and we've had it where we've had a missing child. we've sent 20 officers and to flood a neighborhood. So there's a good collaborative partnership between the two.
That's great.
I need the sheriff's office, and sometimes the sheriff's office needs us.
You
And
talking about the case over off of Pine? The kid
No, not that
jumped
one.
in the water? Or
Oh, that
almost
was
jumped in?
that was
a
another
good one. That was another one, yeah.
I was talking the one at Argyle Elementary.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Where it was a familial type thing going on, but it apparently looked like something completely different. And it was just outside, down the street from a school, and it got reported, and we immediately dispatched sheriff's office, school police, and started scouring neighborhoods. So,
you know what? Going back to the other incident that I just mentioned, though, there was a lot of things that came into play that day as a real life example of Safer Watch and collaboration. So there's a report of a child who's walked off a school campus, a younger child, and so it comes in and we start flooding into the area, and people are trying to remember, what was this kid actually wearing? Which way did he go? So the school system started looking at all of their cameras. They were able to screenshot what the child was wearing and what gate the child went out of, and then sent that via Safer Watch into our dispatch center. And then we were able to turn that around and put it out to all the responding deputies and officers. So we had an understanding, an idea of what he was wearing and what general direction he went into. And that was another day where we flooded the area with multiple agencies.
And I think that illustrates to a topic we're going to talk about, not next, but very soon. I'm teasing this, by the way, because, have you ever watched a news show that's an hour long and they give the headline and then you don't get to hear the headline till the end?
58 minutes
yes.
in. Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Because I know this is what parents want to hear. It's coming. But it illustrates, if an incident happens, it's all hands on deck. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's zero concern from my standpoint that anybody in Clay County that can help will be there to help.
Including the firemen. Clay County Fire Rescue, on missing children, they will take their units that are in the area and in service and ride around, and they have specific things that they do too during a missing child search.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Yep.
But before we get to that, a little bit maybe more lighthearted, if I'm going to put you on the spot because I didn't prepare you for this, so I apologize. What is, without going into details, because obviously, these are children, we don't want to go into any details, but are there any more, like, you deal with a lot and it's probably not your ordinary thing. Is there any incidents that stick out that you can talk about you're like, really? Like, what
funny,
things like that so that people listening can understand the depth of stuff that y'all actually have to deal with.
Oh gosh, I mean,
for those listening, Chief Wagner's face just lit up with a big old smile. I can only imagine the stories.
There are just so many interesting things that go on in a school campus. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to narrow it down. Are you talking about a criminal type thing, or just one of the darndest things?
Like the darndest things.
Darndest things, yeah.
Oh.
Well, like, for example, like, they don't do this anymore, thank goodness, because they probably would end up in jail. But, like, kids used to drop cherry bombs in toilets, which is so stupid and incredibly expensive. But
I mean, I know that the going along something like TikTok is the devil to me.
TikTok is the devil.
Because they'll put
first.
out these fictitious challenges.
Oh, yes.
And when we had those challenges, and it was destroy toilets or something like that, and these kids started breaking toilets
because of a TikTok challenge.
Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Why would you listen to something? I just couldn't even understand it. And, luckily there was minor damage, but still they were pulling the soap dispensers off, and just, those are some of the wildest things that I've thought, how does something over the internet translate to meet us right here in Clay County, Florida? And there it is.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah. And I can't imagine all the things. Because you're dealing with hormones and emotions and things that are just amped up at that level compared to when you get a little bit older and more. Actually, it's probably the same, but we just get more tired, and so we can't deal with it.
I would say the most, because of the hormones, as you spoke, junior high is probably the toughest years for students. They're learning their identities. They're no longer in elementary school, but they're not in high school, and they're finding where they fit socially, and mean girl clubs, because it's pretty tough.
Oh yeah. I only wear pink on Wednesdays. That's for mean girls.
Those are a lot of dynamics and understanding and using social media. It's the devil sometimes. It's a great thing, but sometimes it's bad. And these kids, when they're faced with some of the social dilemmas at school, but they go home and then they look at social media and they see it and it's bombarding them. And so that's where a lot of understanding and reaching out and hearing about it, so we can stop things, from a school side, from a school policing side, so that one, we have a good environment at school as well as when these children go home, because they're mostly in their parents' hands, but it still can be tasking on that. And I think as the old saying, it does take a village to raise a child. It's true.
That is true. Yes, it is. So one more topic before, again, we get to the big deep one here is, I want to talk about bullying. How does it, to me, especially, it's a horrible thing. It leads to good kids hating school. It's a horrible atmosphere. How do y'all handle that?
So bullying is handled on an administrative level on the school. There are specific statutes that address bullying. And one thing I do want to make sure that we talk, bullying and being mean, a student being mean to a child and bullying are two different things. Bullying has some very specific, it's a power control. It taking power over another child is true bullying. Sometimes it's physical, but being mean, calling somebody bad names or remarking on it could lead up to that, but it's hard to say. But they are addressed on a school-based level, and if it ultimately bleeds over to where there may be some criminal aspect to it, then we will be involved in that. But it's outlined very specific, and there can be some sanctions for bullying, not only on school, but police involvement, depending on how far it goes.
Okay. All right. Well, now let's get into the big topic that I think everybody who, when they see the description, is expecting we'll talk about. So we pray it never happens here in Clay County. We pray it never happens anywhere in the nation or the world, because it's a horrible thing. And that is an incident on school where, it's either think there's going to be a shooter, an active shooter, person with a gun on campus, that type of scenario. Obviously, we can't go into operational things, because I think that people need to understand that that was one of the, and y'all can touch on this, the incident that happened that was very well filmed was those officers, the recent one, the two, Nashville, thank you, did a phenomenal job. But unfortunately, if somebody were to watch that, they saw some weaknesses that they could then use. So there's I'm so glad that people were able to see law enforcement at their finest, but I've heard there's some negatives of that. That was some concerns too, that they public weaknesses that now have to be shored up, basically, that maybe somebody who was going to do something bad didn't know of before. So walk us through that. That's
So you hit the nail on the head. You pray that it never happens, but as law enforcement, we have to prepare for worst case scenario. And worst case scenario is the active shooter. And so, Northeast Florida, we have a long, history of preparing for active shooters. You have active shooter tactical training. You have active shooter incident management, which teaches like the first line supervisors and stuff how to start managing this incident, this event that's happening. And so, when I came into office and Chief Wagner got settled in, we got together and said, why don't we take this active shooter training and active shooter planning and really dial it down into each individual school. So by law in the state of Florida, there has to be an active shooter plan for the schools. And most school systems have a plan that covers every school, but we know that every school is different. Some of our schools have medically fragile children. Some of our schools are smaller and have one driveway in and one driveway out. Some of our schools are neighborhood schools and have multiple access points. So what we did starting last summer, is we sat down with every single school principal. I think all of them showed up.
We did.
And their chosen administrators. the school board police, Clay County Fire Rescue, and members of the Clay County Sheriff's Office to include patrol, SWAT, and traffic. And we said, okay, Mr. School Principal, Mrs. School Principal, this is your school. If something happens, here's what you can expect from us as law enforcement. And here's what we would like to see from you to help. It's called the chaos clock. And in any incident, you're fighting two things. You're fighting the bad guy and the clock. And as soon as you can mitigate the bad guy, you can start getting injured to the medical and medical to the injured. In a lot of cases, including, and I'll speak to Parkland, injured kids sat on the third floor for 45 minutes before somebody got to them for medical treatment. That can't happen. We call that the chaos clock. From the moment the first shot goes off until the last injured person is triaged and transported out, there's the chaos clock, and our goal is to shorten it. So we shared all of this with school administrators and said, okay, what nuances or characteristics of your school do you want to share with us? How many students do you have? How many staff do you have? How many entrances do you have? Where's your school resource officer's office at? Where's the library at? Where's the cafeteria at? Because those are all key places that responding law enforcement need. Where's the alarm box at? Things like that. And so some of the meetings...
Where are the keys to get into a school?
Where are the keys to get into a school? I mean, just little things like that. Because if they go on lockdown, how do we get in? I mean...
That's a good point.
Yeah. And so we walked through, in the meeting format, we walked through every single school to include, and Chief Wagner can speak to this more, to include a phased evacuation reunification plan specific for that school. So now the principal and their top administrators take that information back to their schools, but they know what they're going to see from us and what they expect from us, and vice versa. And one of the really great things that I think came out of all of these meetings, some of which lasted 4 hours. I mean, we dug in deep, and but every school has a very short plan that can be pulled out. It's just a few pages with detailed information on it that we need to know. For example, on the plan, it'll say you have 25 medically fragile children that are typically in this room in the school. We need to know that. So that's an example. But one of the things that came out that was really great was the leveled reunification plan. You want to talk more about that?
Yes, level 1, 2, and 3. Depending on where an incident would occur on a campus, it could be a major incident. We used as an example when we were doing these, we call them CHIRP plans, the County Hazardous Incident Response Plans. CHIRP, because,
they're called tactical operations plans, but that didn't fly in the school system.
Yeah, so we call them a CHIRP plan because, when you're dealing with administrators. But a level 1 would be something, if there's an incident that occurs on campus and we can keep it isolated and do normal dismissal, we would use the typical parent pickup that we use. And there's a reunification process of how to check the child out and reunite the child with a parent, or ultimately get the child on the bus and back to normal. Then there's what's called a level 2, very similar type of situation. However, if the normal parent pickup and the normal exchange of parent-student is impacted, we would go to a different location on a campus. And then, of course, level 3 it's a pretty bad situation, and all resources have blocked it in and we can't use it, then we would do an off-site relocation, and we have those pre-staged out. And what I do want to share with our community members is that when this comes down, should we never have this, but unfortunately we are prepared for it, always pay attention to the social media Safer Watch and things, because that's where we're going to give you the directions. The officers that are on the scene, that are holding a perimeter or that are actively engaged, they are probably not going to know, but through the training and the collaboration that we have in the county, our PIOs from the sheriff's office, the school district, the municipal police departments, emergency management, they will all be together through a group that will give one message that is accurate, not sheriff's office reporting something different. Just pay attention to those, because that's going to give you the most accurate information. Because it's not, if it's a bad one, like a level 3, you're not going to be able to get to the school. go to the next location because that's where we're going to be coming to bring that.
Yeah, and let me give you some specific scenarios, right?
Okay.
Because people, we explain this to people and they say, well, I still don't understand what you're saying. So, and these are pretty graphic. So if you're sensitive, please turn the volume down right now or something. But so let's say that we have an ex-husband who comes into a classroom and shoots his ex-wife and then shoots himself, and it's very isolated within the school. It's contained. It's over. Okay, that would be a all hands on deck response, but that would typically be a level 1 reunification, which means we would tell the parents, it's going to be normal pickup. Get in the normal parent pickup line, normal traffic flow. We have contained and isolated this incident. We just need you to be calm, get in the parent pickup line, and you will be reunified with your child as quickly as possible.
And we would communicate that through.
Exactly
what it's going to be.
Yeah, and so the message may look something like, we've had an incident on campus. It is isolated. There is no further threat. This will be a level 1 parent pickup. Please pick up your child as you normally would in the parent pickup line. Okay, that would be something. That would be the message would look something like that. So let's say a level 2.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
So if in that scenario there, though, I'm assuming, again, horrible, but the kids in the room, they might need to talk to somebody. So those parents would be notified separately. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So what would be happening as people are lining up? We'd realize, okay, we have these 15 kids in the room, and let's say it's little Johnny Smith. Well, when Mrs. Smith comes up and says, hey, I'm here to pick up little Johnny, we'll say, ma'am, little Johnny's not injured. He's fine, but we need to hold him back to talk to him a little bit more. We're going to have you park over here and go wait in the cafeteria for further instructions.
Okay.
Something like that.
With something like that, there would be individual communications on that one.
Yes.
But as a whole, if you're not impacted, you wouldn't get that phone call.
So the key takeaway here is follow directions, and when you get there, you'll be told more information. One question before we go a little bit further, though, from a parent's perspective, I'm assuming the worst thing you can do is, even though your instincts are to immediately go to the school, you probably should sit tight till you hear something. If you know there's something going on, right?
Yeah, that's just not reality. I tell you, we can preach that all day long, but
they're going to come.
Yeah, what we've learned with active shooter incidents is, especially with social media and the instant phone, it used to be if there was an incident, it would take 30 minutes before somebody got a phone call at work or on their landline, and you had that time. It's instant now. So they're coming. And I can tell people all day long, we'll call. Don't call us. We'll call you. That's not going to work.
Right.
No, we're calling you.
Yeah.
We're going to communicate.
We're going to communicate. And the other thing that's important to understand, and I want people to know, is that I promise you the information is going to evolve. And people say, well, that's not what you said. Well, information evolves and situations evolve. And let's go back to this. Let's say that we go back to that level 1 reunification, and we're moving right along. Well, now let's say that 3 cars trying to get into the parking lot at the same time crash, and that is now blocked, and we can't use that driveway anymore. We got to change to keep it moving. So I think people need to know, in a catastrophic event or in an incident, there's going to be evolutions of information and things will change, and that's normal. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's normal. So that would be a level 1.
Okay.
Traditional parent pickup line. You'll see lots of firemen and policemen there, but we're going to have you come in and get your kids. So let's talk about a level 2. Now, a level 2 is and when we've talked all these through, is we can't use the normal parent pickup line for whatever reason. Let's say we have the shooting that I described, but the only place for the policemen and firemen to park was in the parent pickup line. And we can't move those cars right now because we're still working the scene. So what we may do is say, okay, parents, we're going to a level 2 pickup. And what that means is that there is a pre-designated location very close by, within walking distance, even for our smallest kids. And we'll say, okay, you can't come through the parent pickup line because the ambulances are still there. So we're going to have you take your kids 1 block over to the church parking lot. You'll line up there and we'll reunify you with your children with this level 2 reunification. So level 2 basically means we're going to walk the kids to a very nearby location off campus to have you reunify with them. And it's not like they're going to be running over there on their own. They'll be escorted by law enforcement, it should be as controlled as we possibly can. There's no, we're not sending kindergartners down the road by themselves, but it's an off-site pickup. The level 3 is, this is a catastrophic event, multiple casualties. We're not sure who's who, what's happening. We're not sure if we have the shooter in custody. We're not sure of what's going on. We need to get these kids off and away, far away from this campus. And because of the nature of the incident, realistically having them walk nearby is just not going to work because it's not safe. And let's go back to the example I gave you. A guy goes in and shoots the ex-wife, okay, and then holds the other kids as hostages. We can't let any parents near that school, so we're going to have to block it off big. What we would do is then evacuate those kids off the school, put them on school buses, and take them to a predetermined location. And that would be messaged out through Safer Watch and probably through Twitter. We're going to use those as our 2 major communications platforms in a very dynamic incident, and say, okay, we have a critical incident at your child's school. We are at a level 3 evacuation. Your predetermined pickup location is Thrasher Horn. Okay, that could be it. So if you any parents who have children that go to XYZ school, please report to Thrasher Horn. That's where reunification will be taking place.
And that would also be used for natural disaster too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to,
Right.
always that, but
Or like a fire.
A fire.
Yeah, something.
yeah. So all of these are, it's all encompassing for how to reunite parents with their children should something happen at an individual school.
And Chief Wagner brings up a good point. We go to worst case scenario, and he probably knows where I'm going with this. I say the bad pudding experience. Okay. And Judson's looking at me like I'm crazy. Imagine you have an elementary school where pudding is served, and an hour after lunch, you have 200 kids throwing up. That's a mass casualty incident. And we're going to be calling parents in for a level 1 or level 2 reunification. And if there's enough bad pudding everywhere, it may be a level 3. So the active shooter is the worst case scenario. But the great thing is the same plan, these same concepts can be used for the less extreme incidents that may occur on a school.
Now, I'll ask this question, and I want to preface it by saying, even regardless of what the answer is, situations, times dictate that this might not always be the case. But like using your pudding example, which is interesting because you also had that conversation with Clay County Fair
about bad pudding.
About
bad pudding
pudding
is my nemesis.
But it's a real. I mean, it's a real
food poisoning. Is a real issue,
especially on a mass group like that. It could turn badly quickly. Go on a cruise ship where that happens, and you will witness.
Yes.
But anyways, so let's say it's a fire. Would it say there was a fire incident at school, or so that parents, you know what I mean? Like if I'm being told level 3 pickup, I'm going to the worst possible place. Is there a time period where a parent can expect to know, okay, it's not as, where they, I don't know if you can answer that.
The answer is we tried to, right?
Okay.
But everything is evolving and very dynamic. And sometimes, I mean, again, even our great PIO group, in their mind, they may know that, but they forget to verbalize it in the message. I think the key words for people to look for are isolated, contained. That's a key word.
It's safe now.
It's safe now. Or So it's less about what happened and more about the safety of the location. And that's just a habit that we have. It's cop talk, and we try really hard to communicate as much as we can with parents, but in a very quickly evolving, dynamic, critical incident, the cop doing the messaging may forget to put, this was a fire. Because in their mind, it's like, it's an isolated incident, it's contained. And for us, it's like, okay, that makes sense. But for the average citizen, they're like, I still don't understand what's happening.
And then there's one dynamic that we can never, ever keep up with is, especially with older kids, their own cell phones communicating out.
That's
and
true.
Sometimes it can be bad information.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would always encourage somebody to look for the proper information, because we've had incidents at schools where things have got out on social media
That weren't true.
that weren't even true. And I had to get out there and correct that. Like, it's okay, that did not happen. It's bad information.
And I'll give you an example of one. There was a fight, and a chair got knocked over, and somebody told their parents that somebody was shooting. And it went out as there's an active shooter. It never happened. It was a fight and a chair got knocked over. So, yes, listen to your children, right? But also go to the source, because we're going to be putting out the most accurate information that we have at that time.
And in an incident like that, I'm assuming, and I'm asking because a parent was going to want to know this, if an incident like that where there was a small fight, probably not a big deal, a chair got knocked over and one student thought there was a shooting and it goes over there. If you're a parent and you hear there's something going on in school, is there a reasonable time period you should expect to start to hear something? I mean, do y'all tell before you even get there, like there's an incident? Or is it we assess first before we even put anything
So
out?
understand, remember I talked about the chaos clock?
Yes.
Okay. The chaos clock not only includes tactical response and incident management response, it also includes messaging response. And I wish I could give you within 7 minutes or within 9 minutes. I don't know. It really depends on the dynamic of the incident. Just go to us to look for the most accurate information that we have at the time and understand.
Y'all are trying to get it out. I think that's the thing. Your goal is to
let's
get
go
it
back
out.
to the fight, because, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chief, but let's go back to the fight. So the call goes in that there's a shooter. Okay? We have to respond as if there's a shooter. And it may take us 30 to 45 minutes to respond, realize it was just a fight, figure out it was probably just the chair, talk to the kid who says, did you see the shooter? No, so-and-so sent the text. Okay, did you see it? No, so-and-so sent me that text. And then you have to backtrack it, and the kid says, well, I thought I heard a gunshot. And that takes time.
And to our listener, I want to be clear. Respond and assess was the key part there. Not just respond is a lot. They'll be there.
Absolutely.
They'll be there.
And I could speak for other things when it comes to answering your question on how quick we try to get out. When I'm in dealing from a school side, there are requirements the school notify parents for threats to school safety. I'm immediately trying to get the basic information out through what we would call a robocall that goes out to that specific school and the parents that are affected by that school. So it comes out relatively quick, but it may be just the initial part. And just like as the sheriff said, that information will evolve. And then when you start looking for the actual sources, that's where you should be listening to. And I do encourage, especially here, is that parents, because I have seen where we've gotten complaints, well, I didn't get that call or I didn't get that message. They need to go on to Synergy and make sure that their information is correct. And I also realize, because we can see the data behind that, if when our calls go out, if the call was sent to voicemail, if the call was answered, if the call was rejected. I know that in the world that we live in, we're bombarded with spam callers. Well, sometimes these calls come out. Don't block that phone number, because that's a phone number you cannot block.
Well, and I would a tip to parents, because I remember this from kindergarten. They told us they were going to do a test call. So when I knew the test call was, I think they gave us a sheet to say a test call was going in. So when that test call came in, I saved it as, emergency. So in my you can do things like that.
Yep.
Go ahead and save that for that test call when you don't need it. And then it's there. Put school emergency.
Because you can, because that same phone number is the same phone number that comes across when your child misses school and you get that call at 6 o'clock at night that your child was absent. That's the same phone number.
I found that out the hard way because it said school emergency. And I was like, whoa, what's going on?
Or the bus is going to be 10 minutes late.
And sometimes, even though it may be annoying or you don't want to hear it, but that one time, that's the one time you want to have it.
Yeah. And just, for parents that are listening, I promise you the response and the assessment are happening as quickly and as efficiently and as, thoroughly as possible. And we will get out information as quickly and as efficiently as we can. We balance the need to know, people want to know what's happening versus verifying it. We want to, verify. Let's go back to the fight situation. Did a shooting happen or not? We don't know yet. We're still investigating. So just know that we're working hard to get you accurate information as quickly as possible, because we'd rather, the initial something's happening will come out pretty quick, but the follow-up, we want to be accurate versus fast.
Absolutely. And I got to say, so as we close this out, I'm going to give you some closing thoughts. So that's coming. So if you have any, if not, no problem. But I have to say from my end, from someone not in law enforcement and with small children in the community, I have to say I am very impressed And I feel like I feel very blessed community. I don't foresee any problems, but I feel like if it was going to happen, that we are in the best hands. And so I'm trying to give peace of mind to people I've talked to a lot of law enforcement, and a lot of law enforcement does have their act together, but I really feel like we're so prepared here and that takes leadership from y'all, and we appreciate that as the listeners and as a member of this community. So thank you very much. So any closing comments here?
I mean, I'm just very humbled to be able to sit down and talk about some of the things that we do and some of the emergency response plans that we have. That I can say wholeheartedly that even though I'm assuming the other chiefs will be eventually coming and talking. Each and every one, including the sheriff, myself, and those chiefs, the key to all of ours is we care. We care about our community. We live in our community. Our children go to our schools. They live in our community. So we take everything very serious. And Clay has always been that way since I've been here for 25 years. That it's a great place to be, great place to play, and we've got an 8-district school. So I mean, Clay is the place.
Clay is the place. I'll end with that.
Absolutely. You are listening to Never Off Duty.